Hello and welcome to Unpreachy, a podcast of homilies and reflections from St. John Chrysostom Parish. Today, Deacon John Bowie reflects on Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 8, the second reading for Sunday, June 30th, 2024.
Some years ago, I was on my way home from a trip to Pittsburgh, and I took a detour and went through a small town in the mountains where my mom was raised back during the Depression. And after stopping by the church cemetery to visit the graves of relatives that I barely knew when I was growing up, I took a chance and knocked on the door of this modest little house where my great-aunt's sister-in-law, Aunt May, as we called her, where she still lived. Aunt May was in her 90s. And when she opened the door and saw me, she recognized me even though I hadn't seen her in like 30 years. She was overjoyed, and she had me in and wanted to hear all the news about my mom and dad and my brothers and all of their families and Mary Claire and our kids, whom she barely knew. Then she invited me to stay for supper, which I was delighted to do. I was glad to do that. And she went down into the cellar and brought up all these jars of canned vegetables and canned fruit and bread that she had just made that day. And she treated me like royalty at a banquet. We had the most wonderful dinner, the most wonderful evening, before I finally had to get up and head back and get onto the turnpike and head home. A couple days later, I was talking to my mom on the phone about it, and she told me that the jars of food that Aunt May had brought up from the cellar were the very things that she would need to make it through the winter, and how gracious she was to share from her sustenance and from her very existence. I can't help but reflect back on that evening with Aunt May whenever I think about this second reading from St. Paul. St. Paul tells the early Christian community, and he tells us, that even though we might excel in faith and in knowledge and in love, that we should also excel in generosity. And he emphasizes that we should strive to achieve equality with others, so that while our abundance may supply their needs, their abundance, whatever that is, might just as much supply our needs. Each of us has something to offer to others. And just as importantly, each of us has a need that only the other can provide for us. We may not know, we may not be aware, we may not even know what it is that we need until that need is met. But when it is met, there will be the equality that St. Paul talks about. So, what does all of this mean to us? Here's an example. When our kids were younger, maybe in grade school, and we would make 8 for Friends meals every now and then, and whenever we were finishing preparing it and getting it ready, one of the kids, usually our daughter, would put some cookies into the container, and she'd write a small note for the person receiving it. That way, that person, when they would receive it, they'd receive something special, more than just the prepared meal, which was important, which was good, but there would be something personal for them to read. And that was her small gift to that person who she didn't even know. But let's go one step further. Let's ask the question, how do I achieve the type of equality with another person that Paul talks about? And Paul gives us the answer to that question when he says, though Christ was rich, he became poor for our sake so that we might become rich as well. Jesus met the people who became his followers one person at a time, exactly the way he met the woman who was hemorrhaging, and exactly the way he met the synagogue official Jairus. And he entered into their lives, and he felt their hurt, their isolation, their sense of separation, and most especially, their despair. And he invites us to go forth and meet others exactly the same way as well, one person at a time. And as we do this, we can lift them up and become part of their lives, while at the same time allowing them to lift us up and become a part of our lives. And we do that here at St. John's in so many ways, so many remarkable ways. For example, when we deliver the Eucharist to folks who are at home, or at the Wallingford Nursing Home, or at the Chestnut Ridge Nursing Home. When we deliver hundreds of gift cards, Christmas poinsettias, and Easter lilies, and presents to families and individuals throughout Delaware County, especially to our friends at the Divine Providence Center. When we greet our LGBTQ neighbors and friends and family members with love and with acceptance, and when we afford them the dignity and the friendship that God extends to all of us, and when we treat others with the courtesy and the respect that we would like to be treated with ourselves. That's how we walk along the path to true equality. A path where we walk alongside each other. A path where we can pause for a moment when they need to rest, lifting some of the burden from their shoulders when the load gets a little heavy for them, and then allowing them to carry some of our burden when the load gets heavy for us, giving them the opportunity to help meet our needs, whatever those needs might be. St. Paul was not afraid to rely on other people for his needs because he knew that God would take care of him, just like the birds of the air. And he knew that as followers of Christ, we could cultivate and nurture our faith as individuals and as a church when our relationships with each other are two-sided, with each of us simultaneously building the other up and relying on them to help build us up. As St. Paul quotes in the Old Testament today from Exodus, whoever had much did not have more, and whoever had little did not have less. God bless you.
Unpreachy is a production of St. John Chrysostom Parish in Wallingford, Pennsylvania. Visit us at sjcparish.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. This podcast was produced by Brendan Lorden with music by Skytoes on Upbeat. Thanks for listening. Be well.